at the center for a long time. And he is Ron Mantegna, who's going to be interviewing his brother, Joe. So, Ron, I'm turning it over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone. And this is Ron Mantegna, Joe Mantegna's brother. And we've got an interesting situation. This program is going to be more interesting than you ever thought. Here's why. I went through laboriously and trained my brother on Zoom. He's not a technical wizard. And we got together on Saturday and spent an hour on this presentation. But I currently do not see Brother Joe. And in essence, what we have is a situation where we're going to meet Joe Mantegna without Joe Mantegna until Joe Mantegna shows up. And I promise you it'll be interesting. And I hope that there's nothing wrong in California, because it's not like him to not be available for this. So I'm going to proceed to give you probably more than he would, because I'm very close to my brother. And I'm going to talk about Joe Mantegna, and definitely we can fill an hour. Now, meanwhile, Jill is looking to see if we can connect with him, or if he's having difficulty on Zoom, or if in fact he's even part of the discussion group that's here. So I apologize. Certainly not his older brother, but let's go through this, okay? I want you to meet my younger brother. And what you're looking at is a picture of me and him at different stages. The picture on the far left, one of us is playing the accordion, one of us is playing a ukulele. That's my dad and that's my mom. We lost our dad at 57. So he really never had an opportunity to see my brother become an actor and do anything that was more significant than theater at the high school. Now, there's a story behind this, and I'll get to it if there's time. Now, the Mantegna name is Sicilian. It's from a tiny village in Sicily called Calasciabetta. What's interesting about this village is that it's on the top of a mountain. And what's interesting is its name. It's Calasciabetta. In other words, that's a two-word term. That's an Arab term. Now, in the middle of Sicily, it's not uncommon to see villages that have been taken over multiple times by different people. And in effect, Arabs ran this town for many centuries. They Italianized it to call the town Calasciabetta, but it's really Calasciabetta. On the far right is our grandfather, Salvador Mantegna. We never had a chance to meet him. Salvador also died young. His mother and father, Signorina is the male on the left, Leonarda is the male on the right, and the tiny village is what you see on the right. Now, initially, Salvador came to America in 1903. And he was hired by Native Americans to and the slats that you see here of this old house are old 1800s railroad cars that Salvador used in order to build the house. Now, this is Salvador. In the picture in the middle, the tall dude with the black hair, that's my grandfather, Salvador, who I never met. And my grandmother, Angelina, is holding the little boy on the right. Now, the little boy on the right in Italian custom is named after the father of the husband. So his name is Signorina. Now, what's interesting about that is that very rapidly, Signorina became Henry because there were no Signorinas in the town of McAllister. There were a lot of Sicilians. And in fact, the town of McAllister currently has one of the biggest Memorial Day festivals in America, Italian festivals every Memorial Day. So they definitely have a lot of Sicilians there. I have visited it, and it's quite an interesting town filled with cowboys and Indians. Now, the Mantegna family was really part of the West Side. What you're seeing here is a picture as I depicted it of the West Side. And as brother and I, we lived within the boundaries of, I would say, Madison Street and Roosevelt Road. Anything north of Madison, I can't tell you about it. Anything south of Roosevelt Road might as well have been in the suburbs. We lived without cars, pretty much with what you see on the left. The L tracks ran behind our house, and what you see on the top is Grandma and Grandpa Novelli. Now, in the 40s, my father contracted tuberculosis. His two older brothers died of tuberculosis. And he contracted tuberculosis the year I was born. And eventually, within a year, was moved to a sanitarium in Oneonta, New York. And the war happened. And the Novellis had 4 children that went to war. And all of them are heroes. They all came back. But that's Grandma and Grandpa Novelli. And Dad was in a sanitarium for 3 years. Mom was a Rosie the Riveter and basically worked nights. So I was raised by my grandmother and grandfather. My mom and dad are the picture on the right. He was a tall, strapping, good-looking man that had a lung removed when I first saw him at the age of 3. So that was our haunts: Flournoy, Polk Street, Harrison, Holman, Kedzie, Roosevelt. We lived on Flournoy then. All right, let me move this forward. Well, the West Side, and this led to what Joe became as an actor, I'm sure of it, was a wonderful salad, not a melting pot. And the pictures you see there are who we grew up with. We grew up with the term WASP, in my opinion, was a insect until I went to college. I didn't understand white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. We had upper right corner, Italian-American societies, lower right corner, Irish. And the Irish, well, us Italian guys really liked the Irish families because of the gals. They would have so many beautiful in our block. West Side Jewish community was very large. I worked in a Jewish deli in the 40s and early 50s. There was also another family represented by the lower left corner. We won't get into too much of that, but Joey and I both went to school with kids that were the kids of mobsters. And I'll tell you, quite frankly, They were no different than anybody else. There were smart kids, there were dumb kids, they were fighters, non-fighters. I beat up on one kid who got to me so bad, Carl Urbanetti. Well, Carl, his cousin said, his father's going to kill you. Well, like boys, we just made friends in the morning. But you need to know that that was the background of our family and where we lived and what our early lives led us. So now we enter Brother Joe, which we're not seeing in person today. And I'm sure we'll do a repeat on this at some other time if something has happened. But I hope that's not the case. I just hope that it's not a problem. But that's Brother Joe as I first remember him being brought home from the hospital in the upper left. On the bottom is his grammar school graduation picture. And as I said here, during the summers, I was his daycare. And that was our first television set. We didn't have a TV for many years, and we didn't have a car for many years after that. But I was his daycare, and the one thing I would do is every day, I would sit Joey in front of the television set, we'd watch the Cubs play, and try to make it a positive experience. All right, Joey, what did Hank Sauer do today? Well, Ronnie, he hit 2 home runs. Isn't that great? And of course, we would not mention the fact that the Cubs would have lost 11-3, but we try to make a positive experience out of it. And baseball was really an important part of Joey's life. And you'll see later that it became a big part of his life. Well, how was Joe discovered? How did acting come into the picture? I remember as his older brother, his interest in music. He picked up a bass guitar. And he went to UCLA, the University of Cicero, located on Austin. That's really Morton East High School. And when Joey was at school, they had talent shows. And at one of the talent shows, he pulled 3 of his buddies together and they formed a group called the Apocryphals. And the Apocryphals are the picture on the left, and Joey is the one on the far left. He was the lead singer and bass guitar player. And they had a assembly at Morton East, and it was one of the biggest high schools in Illinois. And the other thing about Morton East you need to know about is that it had such a professional acting crew headed by Dr. Leckel, who was the head of their acting curriculums. But Dr. Leckel was at the assembly. And at this assembly, he came up to Joe, who was the master of ceremonies. He was the person on stage. He was the person leading the singing and talking between. And he said, is this exact statement: "You're in my class tomorrow, kid. I can teach you a lot, but you have something I can't teach you: stage presence." Well, what happened at that point? And I'm waiting to hear from Joe on why he saw that in himself. But we saw that in him, that he definitely was comfortable on stage. He definitely had a stage presence, and he definitely got his start at Morton East. So I got to see him in the high school productions. This one on the far right is about him as in Little Me. And I saw that play and it was outstanding. What's interesting about that, in that play was a young lady named Arlene Verles. And she'll come into play a little bit later with respect to Joe. But fast forward, and out of this play, he went to Morton Junior College for a year, and then got a scholarship to go to the Goodman School of Theater. While I was at the Goodman School of Theater, and he had productions there where he had the lead. And there were a lot of famous actors and actresses that came out of the Goodman School of Theater. But out of Goodman, he ended up trying out for the play Hair. Now, if some of you on this call went and saw the play Hair, you got to see Brother Joe if you saw it in Chicago. And you also got to see Joe's love of his life, Arlene. And that's Joe and Arlene on the left. Because surprisingly enough, not only Joe was in the play Hair, but so was Arlene, both talented actors and actresses. Now, how did that work out? At that time, I was the heading up Montgomery Ward's creative department for their retail advertising on Chicago Avenue. I had actually 2 copywriters who tried out. There were more than 1,000 young people who tried out for the play Hair. So Joe calls me and he says, "Hey, Ronnie, I'm going to go try out for Hair." I says, "Sounds good." He says, "Well, what happens if you get in the play? You're at school." He says, "Well, I already talked to them. They said if you get in the play, that means you graduated." I said, "All right, well, let's see what happens." So there's, when you go for something like this, you're doing this 3 or 4 different ways. You go for the first group, 1,000, and then maybe they're going to call back 50 of those kids. Then maybe they're going to call back. By this time, the 2 that tried out in my department, they did not go forward. But he called me and he said, "I got callbacks." And he went again and he said he got callbacks. How did he get the role in Hair? Well, he's got talent, but you know what? There are a lot of talented people. But Joe always shows up on time, unless maybe he's misunderstanding when something is going on. So he gets a good rap from the people who work with him, that he's reliable, he's dependable, and he's talented. Okay, but what occurred was even more important. He was put in and made the tribe, and he's back up to the lead. And the backup to the lead and everyone in here signs a certificate that said, "I will promise to not do anything dangerous, so I will not miss a performance." For example, it definitely prohibited the lead from riding his motorcycle, which he broke during the previews and broke his leg in 2 parts, and he's out of Hair, and Brother Joe gets the lead in the rock musical Hair. At this point, he is Burger, and we got to see him. And after, at least almost a year, he says, "Hey, how about inviting your grandfather to come see you? He'd love to see this play." So he gets on. He went. My grandfather Giuseppe went to the Schubert Theater. That's where it was playing, and he got to see the play. When he came home, I said, "What did you think of it, Grandpa?" He goes, "Minga, that Joey got a pretty good body." And we're pretty sure that Grandpa Novelli wasn't just looking at Joey during Hair's famous nude scene. And those of you that recall that, it was quite an experience at that time. Well, I'm going to wait now and see if we can get Brother Joe in here.
All right,
Hey,
I'm unmuted.
Hey, Joey,
Yeah.
let me stop the screen share for a second.
Okay.
There you are. All right. Now, I have to defend myself. I said 10:30 my time. Joe, can you hear me?
Yeah, I heard you. I don't know how I did that. This has never happened to me before, and I do these things all the time. So, I mean, I must have somewhere where it said, because I always ask. I think there was just a confusion, but whatever.
Oh, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I thought, you know,
And I apologize if there was any confusion on my part, but we got plenty
Yeah.
of time for them to meet you.
yeah, that's fine. I mean, I could stay on longer too. I mean, especially now because I was free up until 10:15 in the morning my time. So,
Okay. All right. Well, let me tell you what I did. I brought them into the fact that Mantegna is Sicilian.
uh,
I didn't tell them this, that you don't dye your hair and it's gray, and I don't
Right.
dye my hair and it's black. But we kind of
Right.
think that you got Novelli hair and I got Mantegna hair.
yeah, that sounds right.
Okay. We went through the West Side. There is a question that I have that I would like you to answer regarding that.
Right.
How did your background from the West Side, the fact that I don't think we met a wasp between us. We was Italian, Jewish, Irish, pretty much.
That's
How
for
did
sure.
that affect you? What was your thoughts about the West Side of Chicago?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think one thing it did for me was eliminated perhaps that racial sensitivity a lot of people have. Not a lot of people, well, some people have when they become adults and all that, because we were used to living in that melting pot kind of thing. So, I mean, I look at my grade school pictures, like sometimes those class pictures, and I mean, it was such a diverse kind of thing, starting right at kindergarten, where I had, black kids, white kids, Hispanic kids, and obviously kids of all different nationalities. I mean, you found out who was who and who, like our next door neighbor was, the Cummings on one side were these, they were seemed like they were right from Ireland, and then you had different people from all these different. So I remember coming out of Chicago when we moved to Cicero, which back then did not have that kind of openness about racial sensitivity in many ways, at least in terms of the way that city was, especially at that time. So I think that was helpful in understanding, and I think our parents were instrumental in that, because our dad was very open-minded about all that. I never felt any prejudice from him in the sense of, because he had worked with different types of people all his life and stuff like that. He sold insurance to people of color, things like that. And I think that was, especially in the world I ultimately got into, the world of show business, where it's going to be a hodgepodge of people of different racial orientation, sexual orientation, you name it. And I think I'm grateful and for that experience. Just going back to what you said in terms of how we grew up and the influences that different people had on us.
Yeah, we were one of the few families that moved to Cicero.
Right.
But you went to. I explained you went to UCLA, University of Cicero, located in Austin. How when you were called by Dr. Lecco to go into that class, did you see yourself as, hey, maybe this is something I can do? How did you end up saying, hey, I want to maybe be an actor? What led you to that?
Well, it happened prior to, Jack Lecco, the head of the department, asking me to go into his class, in the sense that it was one of those kind of stories you hear about that you go, oh, that's interesting. In other words, that whole thing of I equated to there's the scene in the movie The Godfather, and it was also in the book, when Michael Corleone goes to Sicily, and all of a sudden he sees this woman, this peasant woman working in the fields or where it was, and he says that name for it. There's a name for it in Italian. I can't think of what the phrase is, but it's this thing. It's like a thunderbolt hits you in the chest. And from that moment, he knew at that moment, this is the woman I love. This is the woman I want to marry. This is the woman I want to be with. That's how I felt about becoming an actor, in the sense that I had no more idea to get into that business than The Man in the Moon. Prior to when I went to audition for this play, A West Side Story, at Morton East, and I only went to the audition because I'd seen the movie probably 10 times, because it was just, I was 15, years old, 15, 16 maybe. And this movie, I was just taken by the magic of it, the music, the dancing, the look, what it was about, because it was urban. You know, it was a life we were kind of living in a way. Not that we were doing games and stuff, but I could relate to it. So when I heard they were doing the play, and that even itself was astounding, because they had signs up at the school saying, "Come audition for West Side Story." And I remember asking someone, "What are they talking about? It's a movie. I've seen it." They said, no, it's a play. It's based on a play. I was so naive. I didn't even know there was a play, West Side Story. The only play I had really seen prior to this, I'm talking about ever seen, was the one you and your then girlfriend, who's now been your wife forever, Kay, took me to, because when you ordered your tickets, there was an extra one in the envelope by mistake. And so you took me. And it was to see this play called, I'll never forget, Mary Mary, downtown
That's right.
Chicago.
Mary Mary.
And I fell asleep halfway through it, because it was kind of, I was probably 15. And so it didn't have any impact on me. So there was nothing about theater or being an actor that pointed me toward it. So, but I audition, I show up at school at Morton East High School that night for the audition. I come with this friend named Glenn Soa, who wound up becoming a state's attorney in Illinois. But at that time, we were just two guys playing on the baseball team. We showed up because he had an interest. He loved the movie too. We walk in, we didn't even know the school had a little theater. So here's this little theater upstairs, because I never knew it existed. All I knew was, I was a junior in high school, and no, I was a sophomore. I was a sophomore in high school, I believe. Anyway, I walk into the little theater, and I see these kids running around in black leotards and stuff, the theater kids. And I'm like, I felt like I was on Mars. It was like, who are these people? They seem like of a different culture. And Glenn looked at me, he said, "That's it, I'm out." He left. It was too strange and weird for him, the whole vibe of it. So I'm there by myself thinking, do I leave? Well, gee, I have practiced that song off the record for all week. All right, I'll follow through. I'll just see what this is like. And so they call my name, and I go up on the stage, and the lights are on from the stage, from the theater. It's just a small little tiny theater, but to me it was like, oh, the first time I'm on a stage, And the piano player says, "Okay, you ready, Joe?" "Yeah." And she hits the note, and I start singing the song Maria. Maria. I get through the whole song, not even able to see the people out there because of the lights. And then when I finish the last note, Maria, there's silence. And then there's this smattering of applause coming from the darkness. And it was so surreal. And that's when I got that lightning bolt. It was that thing of like, and maybe because I'd never had anybody applaud anything I had done before, really, outside of family, because I wasn't that good a baseball player anyway. So that thing hit me in the chest, and it's all the best way I can explain it. Was like I went, "Oh my God, I want to do this now more than anything in my life. I want this to continue, whatever this thing was." And the next thing I hear is, "Thank you, Joey," and go sit down. And then I did, and then
let me add something to that, Joe. Let me add something to that. Mom and Dad come to me and say, your brother says he wants to be an actor. What do you think about that? And I remember saying, well, I exactly remember saying this. Well, he doesn't want to sell drugs. He doesn't want to join the mob. It sounds like a safe career. Will he be famous? No, but he'll be a teacher, and he'll help people, and he'll do good, and he'll be happy. He'll do what he loves. So I was wrong about you not being famous. But I will say this. I will never see you as a celebrity. I see you as an actor. And I think that and I also see you as a good person. That's more important than any of the above. I want to go back to the screen share, Joe, so we can pick up and go a little bit quicker to, I want to go back to the beginning. Okay. Talk about the organic theater. Just I don't want to extend this too long, but we will go a little bit longer than 11:30, so that anyone that needs to leave, they can leave anytime they want. But we're going to continue this. So tell us about the organic. What it was an ensemble group.
Yeah, well, I mean, my introduction through it came through an actor who actually won the Tony Award a couple years ago, Andre DeShields, who was the original Wiz and played a Wiz on Broadway years ago. And people who know theater might understand. He's in that show Hadestown that he won the Tony for that. Anyway, he was in the cast of Hair along with myself and with my wife, as it turns out, who turned out to be my wife Arlene, who was also in it where we first got together. In the play Hair. This is 1969. We did that. That was my first professional job. But when that ended, the next thing I did was a play called Godspell in Chicago. So I really thought my career was on track to be a musical comedy guy, kind of what I had done a lot of in high school and junior college. I had now done Hair professionally. I'd done the play Godspell professionally. I thought, okay, this looks like my ticket into this world that I so much want to be a part of. But then the member, like I said, Andre DeShields, who was in the Organic Theater, where he went on to was go back to this group called the Organic Theater, which was this acting company out of University of Wisconsin, Madison, who had now relocated to Chicago, and we're going to do this play called Warp, which was a science fiction fantasy play. So of course, out of our friendship to Andre, my then girlfriend Arlene and I went to see the play Warp. And we were so taken by the group and the company and the people and the show and everything. Was like, wow, this is this experimental kind of original theater. It was just very exciting. So ultimately, after when Godspell closed and I really didn't know what I was going to do next, I was approached by the Stuart Gordon, the man who was running the Organic Theater, the guy who created it, he and his wife, if I would like to try out for a play of theirs. And since I had nothing else really going on at the time, I thought, well, I like this guy. I like what they're doing. Let me give it a shot. And I read the script, and it was Ray Bradbury's play, it was based on his book, The Wonderful Ice Cream Suit. And to cut to the chase, I tried out for the play. I got cast in the play. I did the play, The Wonderful Ice Cream Suit. It became one of the most, in a way, monumental things I've done in my whole career, because through it, the show was very successful at the time when we did it in Chicago. I think it was like 1973 at this point. We wound up doing it in Europe. We wound up touring the United States, especially California, with it, and became dear friends with Ray Bradbury. And 25 years later, I made the movie with it. And one of the best parts of it was the closeness and friendship I developed with Ray Bradbury, who I was first introduced by you when you had me reading, science fiction books and things like
Martian Chronicles.
Ray Bradbury. When I was a kid, Martian Chronicles, Fahrenheit 451, and I think I had him sign something for you. I think I had sent you a script or something.
You did.
That Ray signed.
I treasure
because
that.
I knew. Yeah, because I mean, when he passed away, I visited him right before he died, and it's on film. They were filming it, and he looked at me. He grabbed my hand. He says, "You've been like a son to me," and I'll cherish that moment my whole life, because to me, Ray was such a giant of a person and a talent, and have that relationship with him as I did was really important. But that I wound up being with the Organic Theater for them 5 more years, culminating with the play that I conceived and helped create with the rest of the original cast, was Bleacher Bums, the play based on the fans of the Chicago Cubs, from an idea I'd had sitting in the bleachers all those years as a Cub fan, thinking, how the hell does this team get all these people to come see this mediocre ball club when we struggle sometimes to get people into a 200-seat theater? You have to have great reviews, otherwise they're not going to show up. And that was the impetus to create Bleacher Bums, and that worked out well. And that was the last play I did for the Organic Theater, but we certainly maintained our friendships throughout that time.
I want to move us forward, Joe, and I know that actually, I hired a writer named Lynn Mamet, and she said, I've got my brother's a promising young playwright, and he wants to hook up with your brother, who is a promising young actor. So we negotiated just a phone call between you two, and tell us just a little bit about David, because I know that led to a life-changing experience, which we'll talk about next, which was Glengarry Glen Ross. But what about your working with Mamet? First of all, I understand he lives on the south side, and I just explained to the group earlier that anything past Roosevelt Road, I had no clue about. But talk about David.
Yeah, well, there is that. I mean, I remember the first time I think I met him was I was going down to the Goodman School of Drama to visit some old friends because I had gone to school there a couple of years prior to I got cast in here. And I was going to go down the stairs, and this other guy was coming up the stairs. The theater was down below the Art Institute at the time. And he sees me, goes, "Oh, hey, by the way, my name's David Mamet. I saw you in that play, you know, whatever play I was doing at the Organic at the time." And he said, "You know, I'm a playwright. Well, hopefully we can get together someday and do something." And I didn't know who the hell he was. And I said, "Oh, yeah, great. That'd be terrific, you know." And then as it turned out, the theater did wind up doing one of his plays, actually one that I didn't do because I was committed at that time. It was during our summer break from the Organic. I was cast in something else in Chicago and did that. But ultimately, let's just like what you said, due to, you know, Lynn's connecting with you and him connecting with me, we made that connection. So here was this guy who when I read his stuff, I thought, here was this guy. He's this Jewish guy from the south side of Chicago. I'm this Italian kid from the west side of Chicago. We're born 2 weeks apart. You know, I'm 2 weeks older than he is. But when I read his writing, I thought, oh my God, do I ever relate to this? Because he wrote in the vernacular I speak. That is the best way I can put it. He wrote like a guy that understood guys who grew up on the west side, not realizing that, of course, guys growing up on the south side are going to be very much the same. That same. We've had the impacted by the same experiences in life. You know, like I said, we're 2 weeks apart in age. So that created a real strong bond, I think, between him and I. And I wound up doing a bunch of little things for him in Chicago, which then ultimately led to, now it's 1983. This is probably 10 years after I've met David, 10 years after I've done things for him in Chicago, but nothing huge, you know, just little, sometimes we do readings at the Chicago Public Library. I did the one play called Life in the Theater, which was the world premiere of it, but that ultimately went on to New York with name actors, and I had nothing to do with that. But it was 1983, 10 years later, when he called me and said, hey, his career was starting to take off a little bit. He had already done one of his shows on Broadway at that time, American Buffalo. And he said, I think I got this new play called Glenn Ross. It's going to open in Chicago, but we got a good chance we're going to take it to Broadway. I'd like you to play this part. And that's all he said. I said, oh, you know, and I'm out here in LA, and I was just doing little bit parts on TV shows, little 2 lines here, 5 lines there. I said, well, send me the script. I'll read it. And that began that saga, which that year, the end of it, to 1983 and through 1984, I couldn't have written a better script for myself, because ultimately we do the play in Chicago, we move on to Broadway, the show wins the Pulitzer Prize, I win the Tony Award. Every director, producer in the world comes and sees, of course, the Pulitzer Prize winning play with the Tony Award winning actor, and it changed my life. So, I mean, I went from, the best way I could put it is this: when I won the Tony Award, you got to remember now, this is 1984. So it's 15 years after my first professional play of Hair at 69. The press are interviewing me after I won the Tony Award. They said, what's it like to win a Tony Award? And I say, well, it's like winning the lottery, but I've been buying tickets for 15 years, you know. And that's kind of what it was like. I put in my time. I mean, I think sometimes you hopefully are ready for success when it comes. And I think in a way that 15 years of banging around Chicago, doing the musicals, working with the Organic Theater, coming to Hollywood, doing different things here, doing theater as well as film and television, but small little stuff, prepared me for when, in a way, that it's like I related to baseball. I've been in the Little League, the Pony League, the Legion Ball. I played it in school. I played it in the minors. Here was my ticket to the big leagues, and thank God they took me in, and now I'm playing left field for the Cubs. You know?
And Joey, I want to tell you, it was a thrill of my life, having had a unit in New York, and I traveled 3 or 4 times a year. I got to see the play 3 times before you won the Tony, before you won it. And
right.
Even then, in the audience, there were just people that were legends that I was seeing. And I would watch them watch you. And it was just a thrill to see in their eyes what they saw in you. And you know, it was just an amazing thing to see my kid brother on stage being honored and respected by these legends of the theater and of film. And I gotta move on, Joe, because we
Yeah.
gotta talk about this. Before you do, I want to just explain to the group that Mamet was a great writer, and he wrote like Joey talked. I think he picked up from Joey how he wrote more than Joey picked up how Mamet wrote. I think it was a symbiotic relationship between the two of them. But House of Games is a movie that everybody has seen and almost nobody has seen on the screen. You and I got tickets. Mom and I rather got tickets to watch you at the Roosevelt Theater. And spoiler alert, at the end of the film, Joe gets shot, okay? And Mom was just shocked at that. And when the film ended and the light goes up, she goes up, stands up, and she's shaking, and I give her a hug, and she says, she didn't have to shoot him. She didn't have to shoot him. And this really nice professor woman who's in the row in front of us with a notepad, and we're taking notes on the film, stood up and said, "Oh, ma'am, please, really, that was a wonderful film." And yes, she absolutely had to kill him. That's the way it worked out. And she started to explain all of the ramifications in the film. And I said, "Ma'am, please, you need to understand, you're talking to Joe Mantegna's mother." And she just, her eyes lit up, and she gave Mom a hug. How did you feel about that movie, Joe?
Well, I mean, you never, with any project, you go in with high hopes and expectations.
Well, let me ask you a question before you finish that.
Right.
Tie it into how does the director and the actor work together? Who's more important in this?
Well, I think there's no value of importance there. I mean, it's like a tennis match, but you better have somebody on the other side of the net, or you don't have a match. So the director needs the writer, and the director needs the actor, and the actor needs the director. And of course, and you're basically doing what the writer has provided. In this case, the writer and the director were the same human being with Mamet on that particular project. But I don't think there's it's apples and oranges, but yet together you're going to create the fruit salad. So, I mean, there's no one thing more important than the other there. I think the most important thing ultimately is the script. I mean, we have a saying in the theater, if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage. So, I mean, if you have a really wonderful script, you can almost give it to any good actor and any good director. And at least if they create the thing that's been on that page, if they at least give it a good shot. Obviously, depending on the talent of the director and the artist, the actor will differentiate how good it can be. But the material is of vital importance, because otherwise, otherwise you might as well be reading a phone book. You got a great director and you got a great actor, but if they're reading the phone book, it's not all that interesting. But if the material is great, that's what's important. And
Joe,
in this case, it was.
Yeah, I want to mention this, but I don't think we want to spend time on it. Right now,
Right.
If you go to Showtime, you'll be able to see, you'll be able to see Homicide. It's written by
Right.
Mamet. It's a wonderful film. And
Right.
William Macy is just a bit part in this. Joe is the lead.
Right.
But if you can watch that film, and I know that we've got people that we have my Jewish friends are on the line with us, and they
Right.
need to watch this film. You have played many different roles, but this is one that is very significant. And if we have some questions about it, we can get back to this. I want to get to this because now, after Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross, and after doing wonderful work for Mamet, other people are calling you. And I get a call from Mom. And you have to understand, my mom, who died almost at 102, she was the life of everybody who ever met her. But she called me and she said, "Hey, Ronnie, call your brother." And when Mom called, I did that. I said, "All right, Mom, what's up?" She says, "Well, I ask Joey 2 questions all the time about his movies, especially after that one where he got whacked. Well, I want you to ask, I ask him, Joey, do you dress well? And are you alive at the end?" Well, Joey just called me and he said he's got a great film that he's in by this Coppola guy and that he dresses well. I says, "Okay, I get it." So I called you, Joe, and they said, all right, Joe, when do you get it? So what was your answer?
Yeah, I may have said something like maybe you know, to tell mom to look away when the parade starts or something.
Well, you told me it was the first half. You were in the full first
Yes,
half.
exactly. Right. But then we get to the Miyuchi parade, which is, you know, a kind of a monumental moment in the movie, about somewhere around halfway into the movie. And I said, yeah, best distract mom during the parade. Yeah, but yeah, that was quite an experience.
The other thing you do a lot of things, but tell us about the voice.
Yeah, well, this is interesting. This is my longest running character. First of all, I'm still doing it. In fact, I have to go in and do some ADR, which means some extra, you know, fix up some of the sound on it of an episode next week. Fat Tony on The Simpsons. I've been doing this for 31 years now, and it just started. The show, which is one of the longest running shows on television. Actually, I think it is now the longest running show on television. It's been on like for 34 years. So they were only their third year on, and I hadn't even seen it at that time. I'd heard about it. I figured, well, it's a cartoon. It's for kids and stuff. I wasn't aware of it, but I get a call after, and partly I'm sure it had to do with the fact that The Godfather had come out. I'd played this character, Joey Zaza, in The Godfather. So everybody equated, at least that year, of, oh, Joe Mantegna played like the biggest name, you know, the most kind of most visible gangster in the movies, at least, you know, of that time. So The Simpsons got this idea, well, we'll create this character called Fat Tony, which is kind of like a fun version of a character like Joey Zaza in a way. So when they cast me to do it, I said, okay. I read the script. Then I watched a couple episodes of Simpsons and thought, this is not a kid's show. This is very smartly written. It's funny. It's a cartoon, but it's you know, well, obviously the success shows how well done it is. So I agreed to do it. But I remember when I showed up to do it, I realized, well, I don't really want to sound like I did in The Godfather, because to me, then it's like I'm almost recreating Joey Zaza, which was pretty much my own voice when I did the movie. I said, so on a whim, I started to think what kind of voice he might have. And then, as you well know, we had our dear uncle, our mom's brother, who I'd been in a way, like a second dad to me after our dad passed away when we were, you know, both fairly young. Due to, you know, a lifetime of smoking, he talked like this. I mean, this was Uncle Willie's voice. And so all of a sudden, when we were doing the read through with the cast, I'm there with the cast of The Simpsons. And back then, Simpsons was not that popular. So we were shooting it in the basement at 20th Century Fox, not shooting it, but recording it. And so when I get to my first line, I thought, well, I'll just give it a shot. So I whatever that first line was, I went like, you know, yeah, how are you, Bart? Yeah, my name is Tony. You know, and nobody said anything. There were a couple of giggles, and I thought, okay, the director of the episode didn't say, well, why are you doing that voice? We want you to sound like yourself. Nobody said anything, so I just kept doing it. And of course, I finished it, did it, and I thought that was it. I thought, okay, it was great, it's fun. I get to call Uncle Willie and say, Uncle Willie, hey, you inspired me with that role. And little did I know that they, you know, after the show aired, they called again and said, hey, you know, we kind of like the character. Would you do it again? I said, sure, I'll do it again. Well, I've been doing it now for 30 years, and apparently I've done the most of any Simpsons character outside of the, you know, the core group. And I remember 15 years into it, Uncle Willie happened to be in town. I brought him to the recording session. And all I did was I say, hey, I want you to meet somebody. Say hello, Willie. And of course he went, you know, hi, everybody. My name is Willie. You know? And of course they all went, oh my God, it's him. That's the guy. But that's the gent.
Let me go to my mom's
Uncle Willie.
other second question, Joe.
Yeah.
And this was the other one that was very memorable. It says, all right, Ronnie, your brother's been doing stuff now lately, but you got to give your brother a call. I think he's in trouble. He's only working 1 hour a week.
Right.
And that started when you got First Monday and then Joan of Arcadia, and it led to Criminal Minds. So, you know, I called because once you said to do it, I did that. And you said, no, you know, the wolf is very far from the door, not a problem.
Yeah.
How is working with an ensemble like Criminal Minds compare with having worked with the organic? Is it similar or not the same?
No, it's very similar. It's very similar, and most actors will tell you that that's what you hope for, and especially on a series when you know you're going to be working with the same people on a continual basis. I mean, you hope for a good ensemble when you make a movie, but it's usually a one-shot deal, and it is what it is. You leave saying, okay, well, that was a good experience. Like I think of The Godfather 3, it's a great experience. I worked with a lot of wonderful people, but you don't often make lifelong connections with it. As it turned out, Andy Garcia and we were the new guys on that movie. It created a friendship that we have to this day. But yet, I liked all the other people. We all got along, but we're not going to necessarily run into them and see them again, perhaps ever. You do a TV series, and if the show has legs, which as it turns out, Criminal Minds did, you go in saying, well, okay, it might be fun to work with these people. Let's see what this is like. Little did I know I was going to wind up doing it for 13 years. And it really was a wonderful experience because when the ensemble is good and you all get along, and in a way, that's probably why the show was successful, because I think that translates on screen. The same chemistry you have, personally, can emanate in the show itself. And I could tell even from the fan mail I get, we all get tons of fan mails to this day. They'll say stuff like, we can tell that you guys really are into each other and you like each other and you have this relationship. Seems like you really do feel about, and it's true. So there was a wonderful experience, and I could give you a little news. There's a good chance, it's not a done deal, but there's a good chance we may even be bringing it back, because now they have these streaming services now, and there's a chance. Certainly been talk of it, and we're certainly moving in that direction. That Criminal Minds just may make a return on one of the streaming services they have.
It's very popular in Europe, Joey.
Huge in Europe. Well, that's part of the reason why they want to bring it back too, because they base it on syndication. In other words, the show's syndicated all over the world, and I think ever since we left the air and became fully syndicated around the world, we're still, I think, in the top 5 of syndicated TV shows on the planet Earth. So we have a ton of fans out there who are still very supportive. I mean, I get probably 10 email letters a day from all over, from Germany, Russia, China, Japan, Hungary, you name it. So
Joey, there's a question from Chad I want to ask you, but I first want to remind the group that we're going to run a little bit late. I know that people that need to leave can leave at any time, but we've got 113 people still on this call, so we're going to continue for a few more minutes.
Sure.
Here's the question from chat, from Bob Bloom. Manny Patinkin left Criminal Minds because he became creeped out by the sick characters and crimes. After a couple years of watching the show, I had the same feeling. Did Joe have the same kinds of reactions? And if so, did he manage them? P.S. Joe was my favorite character on the show. Well, thank you for that.
Right.
Go ahead, Joe.
He was right. Well, I would say this. As you can imagine, I've been asked that question, on occasion. And my answer is this. I was been fortunate enough to spend time at Quantico, to go to the real place, to be at the headquarters of the FBI. I got to know people in the FBI. So I've gone there for research. I've gone there even for another show that I do on the Outdoor Channel, Gun Stories, where we trace historical firearms. And we shot an episode at Quantico at FBI. So having had those experiences with the real FBI, when I'm asked that question, hey, doesn't it creep you out? And my answer always is absolutely not. And the reason is this: we portray a real life organization. There is a behavior analysis unit of the FBI who really does that job. So when you're watching our TV show and you see an episode where I walk into a room and maybe that guy's laying on the floor and he's got, I'll be glib about this and say, oh, he got an arrow stuck in his head, and they focus on it. When the director says cut, the guy with the arrow in his head stands up, pulls it out, and walks over to the craft services table and has a sandwich, and we all laugh and talk about it. In other words, we are recreating a make-believe version of what really happens. So they should ask that question to the real guy who has to do that job, because when they walk into a room and this guy's sitting there with an arrow in his head, that's the real deal. And those are the people that I have such respect for. How could I, as an actor, say, oh yeah, it creeps me out to be in a scene that's kind of gruesome? I embrace those scenes because on that show, we showed what these men and women have to really deal with. And if it causes you, person, to maybe look away and be a little upset and go, I don't know if I can, I get it. But like I said, this isn't some Star Wars kind of show that's about, make believe and about fantasy or about stuff that happens in outer space. This is the stuff that's happening every day on the planet Earth in the United States and around the world. And thank God we have these men and women who do this job. So our job is to portray it as realistically as possible. So absolutely not. Doesn't creep me out. And I use it as my homage to the men and women who really do that job.
Joe, I'm just gonna say this on this slide while people look at it. Is there any lesson that you've learned from working with the legends like of Don Amici, Frank Sinatra, Michael Jordan, Ringo? These are all people you know well. Tony Bennett, a good friend, Madonna,
Right.
but especially Peter Falk.
Right. Well, I mean, mentioning Peter Falk, that comes to mind, just what you asked, because I remember once saying to me, we became very, very dear friends. And in fact, when he passed away, he had never bothered to go ahead and go. You have to kind of, when you get that call saying, you know what, they want to award you a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He got that call back in the 70s, but Peter, being Peter, was like, yeah, okay, we'll deal with that. And he never followed through. He never picked a day to do it. He never did what he was supposed to do. So after he passed away, I kind of made that happen, because it can be done posthumously. And so if anybody who comes to Hollywood, he'll see that his star is right next to mine now, because I asked for that to happen, and I gave the speech that person gives when someone gets the star. So we were very close. But one thing I remember him saying to me over the years that we were friends, I think I'd been asked to do a certain movie, and I forget what it was, but it was a very, it might have been a Woody Allen picture, it might have been a Barry Levinson picture, but it was by a wonderful director, a good director. And I remember mentioning to him, I said, yeah, I've got this offer from this movie. And he said something to me. He says, Joey, you'll never get hurt working with the great talent. They're never going to hurt you. And there's some truth to that, in the sense that the ideal is to, work with the best. And if you get that opportunity, it's like in anything. It's in sports as well. I mean, you want that group around you. You're going to hopefully make them better. They're going to make you better. And so you feed off each other. That's why they say in the Olympics, the best runners want to run with guys that are faster than they are, because that's what pushes you to your limit. So there is that. So I've been blessed, to work with Don Amici. We used to laugh about it, that my grandmother, loved him. My mother loved him. My wife loved him. So I mean, he spanned all those generations of women who were like, oh, Don Amici. So it's that. I've been very blessed to work with.
All right, Joe, we just have a few
caliber.
minutes. I want to wind up.
Okay.
But in interest, I know we still have a good group there, but tell us a little bit about what you're doing now. I know with the Memorial Day that you're doing with Gary, you guys are tremendous. I get a lot of comments from the group here, especially about that. But go ahead, tell us about all of these, each of them.
Well, I've got different things going on. I just now completing our 11th season of Gun Stories, which, like I say, is a show that the name sounds ominous, but it's not. It's really about more the history of firearms over the history of the planet Earth. And like you highlight this one episode that dealt with like the guns of the immigrants. We talked about the people coming to this country and how that was a tool that was important to them. And we shot an episode at the house our father was born in Oklahoma. The play Lenny Bruce, I'm not a comedian, I'm Lenny Bruce, that's reopening in Chicago next month in November. As you know, we had a successful run. COVID happened, it shut down. It's reopening now. So I would say all you people in the Chicago area, if you want to see it, this one-man show that I directed on Lenny Bruce, it's going to reopen in Chicago first week in November. The theater's on Southport. I can't think of the name of the theater right now, but you'll see the press for it. I've got a new series coming out on Amazon called As We See It, which deals with 3 young adults on the autism spectrum, created by Jason Katims, who did Parenthood and Friday Night Lights, if people remember those TV shows. It's a wonderful series about these young adults on the autism spectrum, which is something I could certainly relate to because of my oldest daughter who has autism. But it's a wonderful series, so I've shot that. And in terms of the National Memorial Day concert, I've been doing that for 20 years. That's kind of like my hot button. In other words, as my brother well knows, we had many uncles. 4 of my mother's brothers, my dad's brother, all served in World War II. The only reason our father did was because he was hospitalized during the entire war with tuberculosis. And so the military has become a very strong hot button for me. And I mean, I'm proud to be able to say like that General Milley, head of the Joint Chiefs, is somebody I can get on the phone and talk to and as a friend. And I've met such incredible men and women in our U.S. military. And part of it is because I'm not a political person. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. I'm an independent because, and that's part of the reason, because I believe, thank God, we live in a country where we have people who will give service to this country to ensure us the right and the ability to choose, hey, every few years you can get a chance to go out and vote and cast your ballot and do it, hopefully in a peaceful, way, and be a peaceful transition. And so that's why I have this involvement with the military as I do. I mean, their job is to follow the commander in chief, whoever it may be. And thank God we still live in a country where we have that ability to decide who that's going to be over each, every 4 years.
Joe, we could probably do another program at some other time. I want to end with this and then turn it over to Jill, because there may be questions that she can pull out that people want to ask.
Yeah.
But I want to say this, Joe. Joey, you are basically loved by the set designers, the drivers, and the workers behind the scenes. And when I see you, and I've been part of lots of what you've done or get a chance to visit you on a set, I get comments from people who don't say this about everybody. They just tell me what a good person you are. And I know Mom and Dad definitely are very, very proud that they would both to know that. I mean, anybody can be an actor, so to speak, but in effect, what I'm saying is that being a good person trumps everything. And that's what I wanted to say. And I love you, brother.
Well, I love you too, Ron. And you had I have to say this, you had such a tremendous part in my upbringing. If that's the result of it, you had a huge part of it, because you were everything a big brother was supposed to be. And I mean, you were there at a time, when our dad wasn't around a lot, and due to his work at the time, and then with his illness, and then he passed away. I was like 22, 23 years old.
We still can watch the Cubs together, Joey.
No, I know, but you turned me on to this day. It's why I like jazz music. It's why I like to read the kinds of books that I read. And I was 12 years old. You put the Homer's, the Iliad or the Odyssey. You'd make me read it. You take me to the library and make me read books that no 10-year-olds were reading. It's a two-way street.
Turn it over to Jill, because there's probably a couple questions in there. Jill.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Joe, and thank you, Ron, as well. It was fabulous program. There are a few questions. There are many comments about what a great presentation it is to both of you, Joe and Ron. But one question was from Debbie, which is, Joe, who are your favorite actors to work with and why?
That's a good question. That would be a long list. I mean, as I said, first of all, I was very fortunate, like I said, in Criminal Minds, to be with an ensemble that I to this day care about very much. One person I'll tell you I had a strong influence on me was Tom Hanks, because I did an episode of a show he called Bosom Buddies back when he first started, where it was a sitcom. People may remember it from back then. They were pretending to be girls sometimes in order to live in this housing place, and it was a sitcom. And I did an episode of that. I did like 5 lines, guest actor, but I was taken by the way he would treat the other cast members, because usually on the first day, when the new people would be coming in, like myself, he made a point to go up to everybody. Hi, my name is Tom. I'm here. Thank you for being on our show. And I thought, wow, the lead guy on this show is going around and he's being so kind to all of us who are just here to, say maybe a couple of lines. And I never forgot that. And it wound up being ironic that maybe 10 years later, I did the movie Money Pit with Tom. And now we were both doing much better with our careers. And to this day, he still maintained that kind of thing. I run into him every once in a while at events. And he was a strong influence on me in the sense of like, you can never forget who you are. And also, as my brother alluded to earlier, when you have a mother who lives to be 101 and during that time doesn't really quite understand what her youngest son does for a living and doesn't care as long as he's happy and that she doesn't have to see him get whacked on screen. How serious can I take what I do when I know that my own mother really, it's not that important to her that what I do for a living, more so that I'm having a good time and that I've raised a family and that everything's okay. So that to me, so those people, there are those people in my business, and I cherish all those relationships.
Thank you. So were the stories on Criminal Minds based on real stories or fictional characters?
It was a both. It was a combination of both. From day one, from the first day of shooting of that series to the last day of shooting of that series, we always had a real FBI person on staff who was part of every single episode, in the sense of they were there, not necessarily to say that, oh, it has to be exactly what happened or this is exactly the story, but just to kind of keep our feet to the fire in a way, to like, hey, you are representing a real organization. So you don't want to go too far afield to what really goes on, you know. So the stories, some were based very closely to truth and some weren't. And in fact, there's even there's a possibility that if they contacted me that we'll see if it happens, but we may do a show in a way called The Real Criminal Minds, which will be a different show, but I'll be somewhat like of a host where we'll actually go into those stories and how they were inspired and why that particular episode, you know, what was the genesis of it, the fact that they were based on the real story. So I think a lot of people would find that very interesting.
Thank you. Well, there are really no more questions apart from so many comments saying what a wonderfully put together program this is and thanking you so much, both of you. Carol just said David Mamet went to school with her at O'Keefe School on the South Side. So that's an interesting fact there. And someone else asked about accessing the recording of this program. I can help you with that. First of all, the link is sent to Glenview TV, and then we'll have it displayed on our website when we put it up there. So you will be able to see it again. I just want to thank Joe and Ron, especially, both of you so much. And I think that's all the questions that we have.
I just have one comment.
Yeah.
Joe, thank you so much. I'm program chairman of the organization, and Ron and I have been good friends, fished together and so forth. And I think this was wonderful. And thank you so much for doing it.
No, it's my pleasure. You know, this is for the hometown crowd, which is a double
Right.
pleasure. So in fact,
Right.
I was involved in you guys, and I'm happy to be here, and I wish you all well, and thanks so much. And I'm sorry I came in a little late. That's that damn time difference.
Joe,
sometimes things get mixed up.
The parts that you might have covered that we couldn't cover were before you were born. So I covered that, and
Great.
That had David Mamet, Madonna, Tony Bennett. We probably could do another program next year. And you can bring us up to date. So we can do this again, and I promise that I'll get the time right next time.
Well, yeah, we'll get on that same page. Well, yeah, that's all. No problem.
All right.
But I'll be
Love you,
happy to
brother.
do it again. I love you too, Ronnie. Take care. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. And thanks for
Bye-bye.
coming, everyone. Bye
Thank
for
you.
now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.